the Chinese Communist Party banned Bitcoin mining
Yeah.
literally in the middle of the run up of the last Bitcoin bull market.
Right.
Is that a
Right.
coincidence, right? So,
Yeah. No.
Lawrence, is it too much to say that governments today are actively price suppressing Bitcoin in order in the hopes of slowing down adoption enough to implement central bank digital currency regimes?
I can't prove it, but it feels to me like there might be a little bit of it. I don't think they've got it suppressed nearly the way they suppress gold, but I do know that the odds, when it took off in the fall of 2020, when it went from kind of in the 5-10K range and shot up to 50. I mean, you can just bet that every single finance ministry throughout the world said, "Holy shit, we got a serious problem here." So, and I'm sure they've been thinking about wargaming. How do we address this problem? Um,
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you saw the bipartisan. By the way, there was a law in Congress that was passed very quickly when El Salvador, which GDP wise is very extremely small country, saying Bitcoin is potentially could potentially become a threat.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
thought that
Some
was
senator was
interesting.
out hammering Bukele for I don't know what reason. But it's like, why would he even give a shit about El Salvador? I mean, why would he even care?
Yeah.
I mean, well, I know why he cares. I mean, they know. Look, here's the thing. The best piece of news is there are so many more of us and the internet. I mean, look, we have a centralized system and, it really worked well for them. I mean, the New York Times told you what the truth was. The government told you what the truth was, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the internet coming along has been wonderful, right? Because it allowed us all to communicate with one another very inexpensively and to create alternative views or I believe much more accurate views of what the truth is. And so, and so you're seeing the internet is basically messing with their narrative. And consider the legacy news networks. I mean, there's some great charts that show how Joe Rogan is basically burying CNN. And that's because people know when they're being lied to. I mean, if you piss on their leg and say it's raining, they figure it out. And so all we got to do is educate as many normies as we possibly can. And guess what? Having your electrical bill go up 100%, having a hard time buying food, having your family suffer, being a millennial that's getting screwed. I mean, you tend to get educated. It's like, what the fuck? You're messing up my life in a big way. God damn it. I mean, you've seen these protests in Europe, the farmers and others. You saw the truckers protest. I mean, this is only going to grow. This movement, it's only going to grow. Pierre Poilievre, the guy who is now the Conservative Party leader in Canada, I mean, he might get elected, right? And that would be fabulous. And so he's a Bitcoiner. He's a friend of Booth and Foss. So, it's coming. It's coming. I mean, we don't have our Ron Paul yet. We need a Bitcoin Ron Paul, but that's coming. It'll happen. It's people are smart, and it can take some time, no doubt, but we've got a much better hand. I mean, I like the side that we're on in this whole fight. I mean, we're going to win. I mean, Marty Bent has it right. We are going to win. There is no doubt we are going to win. Now, the time scale, that's a different matter. And I prefer it happen sooner rather than later because I'm not as young as you. And I want to see it.
In the commercial relationship with government, that's the one area that we've just had this pernicious problem, right? That government always has all the leverage. They can set monopoly pricing. They can tax you as much as they want effectively. I would say at the local level, democracy works to some extent, but at the national level, it's a joke, man. Federal government is just purely parasitic, right? They're just extracting resources largely through inflation, but also through taxation. And like Misa said, all of those resources and capital are being misallocated. They're sure as the hell not going to preserving life, liberty, and property. They're mostly going to blowing up people in other parts of the world to extract their resources.
I believe as more people are adopting Bitcoin, they're gaining a deeper understanding of Bitcoin and money in general. The important thing is that they have Bitcoin and they're exposed to the concept of sound money, because most people in the world don't really know what money is anymore. They just think, I have some dollars in my bank account, I can take it out from an ATM, and that's it. But as we're learning very rapidly, that's not really money. If someone else can control it and freeze your account, that's not really yours. If you can align the incentives enough, then you get hyper-Bitcoinization. If you can get the pension funds to buy Bitcoin because it's sound money, that's a good thing. If you can get a central bank to have Bitcoin in their treasury, then they're going to care about Bitcoin. If you can get a nation state mining Bitcoin, then they'll be securing the network. This is how it happens. It's organic adoption, just like Bitcoin was organically adopted. There was no centralized entity pushing out Bitcoin. It's up to all of us to do a little bit and move the ball forward one step at a time.
Why are we hearing about central bank digital currencies all of the sudden? It was never talked about before Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is worthless and it needs to be regulated. But now we're creating a competitive response to said worthless thing that needs to be regulated. Just sit with their words for a moment and observe the world. This is why I always say that the corruption of money is the corruption of humanity. You create a system that people can profit from: coercion, compulsion, deception, violence. You've tilted the incentives towards these immoral actions. Is it any surprise whatsoever, people that follow incentives, not laws, is it any surprise whatsoever that the characteristics of those people become coercive, compulsive, deceptive, and violent? That's who's talking to you. That's Christina Lagarde. That's Jerome Powell. That's every statesman. That's every bureaucrat. Anyone that's representing that the state has any legitimate authority whatsoever is a crony. They're a crook. They're a liar. Do not comply. Reject this shit, right? Embrace the truth. Who is anyone to tell you what to do? You're born free. Be free. Question. Think critically. Question what I'm saying too. I might sound like I'm preaching sometimes, but I'm just passionate about waking people up. Question everything that I have to say. Challenge me. Do the same to everyone else. That's how we move forward.
The benefit of Bitcoin becomes apparent to people when they need to use it. You know, it's all rah-rah to hear about it from your buddy in the office, but, you know, when it becomes like the only form of money that you can transact in for some reason or another, then or a better form of money that you can transact in without restrictions or without rules, then I think the light starts to come on for people, like where we had the situation with the Canadian truckers where, you know, like that was like a funding mechanism for them. Or I even had personally a situation where I was helping a company and they had a programmer in Russia that they were working with during the recent whatever you call that war that's going on over there. And when the banking system got cut off, their relationship with the employee that they had was actually super difficult. Like they couldn't pay his salary. And I was like, well, yeah, you know, what we could do is probably pay your guy in Bitcoin. And so they suggested it to him and he said yes. And like they were like, okay, cool. How do we get Bitcoin? And so that was a relatively easy walk from here to there, because all of a sudden this company that would have never ever, you know, needed that, you know, all of a sudden was not that they wanted to use it, they had to use it. So these type of situations I think are going to be brought about by that same collapse that Chris was talking about, where you know, through no fault of that company's own, they were exposed to a need to use Bitcoin because it just is better money.
I had a guy come to my house. I met his son, and the next day the son brought his father, and his father could like buy the entire city of Miami. And he said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I know Bitcoin is really important. And my son says I got to sit down and listen. And so I orange pilled him for 2 hours. And I'm not going to say who, because it's such a common story, but my point here is every one of you knows someone. Go tell a CEO, go tell your father, go tell your mother, go tell somebody that Bitcoin's going to change the world and they should figure out more about it. because the number one thing you can do is educate the world on Bitcoin and let people know they need to figure out Bitcoin. And every one of you does make a difference, because I would never get those meetings if it wasn't like someone that went and said, you got to pay attention. And my last point to you, you do not sell your Bitcoin. Thank you. Thank you.
When it all comes down, Bitcoin's going to hit 10 million. Was that too bearish from Hal?
Yes. On what time horizon? what time horizon is he talking about? Of course it's too bearish. Let me put it like this. During 2021, $8 trillion were printed by the Federal Reserve. Of course, it's not only dollar bills or figures in people's bank accounts. They use all sorts of fancy terms to call this and that. But they call it quantitative easing, and that's what it was. Like, someone printed $8 trillion. Divide that by 365, and that by 24, and that by 60, and then times 10, and you get the number of dollars printed every 10 minutes. And you can do the calculation on and on again. But what you can take it even further. And I did that. A Bitcoin was created on average every 90th second during 2021, because the block reward was 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. That makes for about a Bitcoin every 1.5 minutes. And within every 90 seconds, so for every Bitcoin mined, $21 million were printed. Get this. Okay, I'm going to get closer to the mic here. $21 million were printed per Bitcoin mined in 2021.
Oh.
That means that $21 million is bearish.
Oh my God, so much heat. My camera overheated.
If you go to China, they're piloting it a few years ago in Shenzhen. So I lived overseas. If you go to Shenzhen, back in 2017, they already had facial recognition cameras there. So if you jaywalked in Shenzhen, they would immediately detect that and send you a notification, and they would deduct money from your what they call WeChat account. They use two main apps, WeChat and Alipay. So you can actually deduct your money directly from your account. This is 4 years ago, so this is not like some sort of conspiracy theory. It's not something that's going to happen 10 years into the future. This happened pre-corona in China. And so this system in China that exists is extremely advanced. They can detect if it's a man or a woman. They can guess your age. They can detect what kind of car model it is, who the manufacturer is. This is a sort of technology that we see in all these dystopian sort of films and whatever. And people keep putting it off and thinking that this is something that's going to happen later in my kid's lifetime or my grandkids. It's already here. And if this gets implemented anywhere, especially in a Western nation, it's not going away. Israel is already talking about the fourth shot. Then they're going to be going to herpes, and they're going to ask if you're gay. They're going to be asking if you ate 3 pizzas this week because it's unhealthy. If you buy certain books in certain countries, your country doesn't like you. You'll lose points in the social credit score system. So this is already the reality of the world in certain places, and we need to be aware of that if we don't want that or if we do. And to be perfectly honest, anybody who wants this vaccine passport, it's a misnomer. It's total control. Everything you do or don't do will be calculated. To the point where if they can detect your GPS signal, if you have a phone on you, they can detect who you're hanging out with. Oh, you're hanging out with somebody that said something bad 9 years ago on Weibo, okay, like a Chinese equivalent to Facebook or something like that, right? Oh, you lose 2 points. Oh, you bought Japanese books, you lose 5 points because you don't like Japan. This is what is going to come here because it's already there.
And we're doing that a little bit with contact tracing for COVID, aren't we? So that they can see where you're at and who you're with.
The simple reality is that the technology that CSIS has and all these big tech corporations, they already know where you are. It's just that they don't want to shock the system too much and admit that they have it. Edward Snowden revealed all this back in 2013. He fled to Hong Kong. They wouldn't keep him there, so now he's in Russia. Yeah. But the NSA has all of your information. They know your Google searches from like February 9th, 2004 in a bunker in Colorado.
Help me, Rhonda.
Right? They have all this information. So, but they don't, like in the US, they have the Fourth Amendment. They're not supposed to track you forever, right? So they pretend they don't have it, but they do. if they really want to utilize.
It is the first of its kind in the world, and today the Bitcoin ATM was unveiled right here in San Diego. Now, if you haven't heard of Bitcoin yet, it is making international headlines and changing the way we exchange money.
New at 5, 10 News reporter Craig Herrera explains how San Diego is now on the forefront of this new technology.
This machine is getting a lot of buzz, and the person behind it all is San Diegan Evan Rose. The main objective?
Basically allowing people to buy Bitcoins with cash Bitcoins out right on the spot.
It's the world's first fully functioning cash-out Bitcoin ATM. You heard it correctly. Bitcoin ATM. So what are Bitcoins? Well, they're not physical coins, but rather digital currency you can send through the internet without going through a bank or clearinghouse. You can use them to buy things online with merchants who accept them.
Bitcoin is inherently technical. It's somewhat difficult to buy. It's very difficult to exchange Bitcoin for hard currency. And the solution that we've come up with in the very familiar ATM platform accomplishes all three of those bottlenecks.
Right now, all exchanges are done online, but this machine changes it all by allowing users to get cash out or make deposits to their accounts.
You can walk up to the machine, make a deposit, you then get a receipt. That receipt has a confirmation number on it. You can give that confirmation to anybody around the world. They can go up to the machine and make a withdrawal themselves.
And there are several currency exchanges where you can trade your Bitcoins for dollars, euro, and more. And it's all based on currency, and today $1 is worth about 100 Bitcoins.
Bitcoin is an idea whose time has come.
In Coronado, Craig Herrera, 10 News.
And Bitcoin ATMs could be in your neighborhood and cities all over the world in 3 to 6 months. The company will also franchise so you can own your own Bitcoin ATM.
I think it's so important, and I try to go over it constantly in my videos, that dollars in and of themselves are not wealth. They have nothing to do with wealth. And I would, to piss off a lot of people, I would go so far as say even Bitcoin and gold. Throw silver in there. That in and of itself is not wealth. What wealth is at the end of the day is a society's ability to produce goods and services. Period. That's it. And I think, and I'm not saying Bitcoin's bad, or I'm not saying Bitcoin or gold or silver are bad. I'm fans of all three of those things. But at the end of the day, that's what wealth is. It's not money, believe it or not. Money, in my opinion, is just a way to store your excess productivity. So hopefully we're a society of individuals that are producing more than we consume.
Right.
And that's how you get wealthy. And the money, whether it's Bitcoin, gold, or silver, is just a way to store your excess productivity. Right.
Yes.
Unfortunately, right now at the United States, and what we've been doing since for a long, long time, going back to the I was going to say the 70s, but maybe the 60s. I need to look at the deficits back then. Well, probably actually going back to Bretton Woods. We have consumed much more than we produce
by design.
And at the end of the day, that is unsustainable. You can't, it's just like a very simple it's like being a farmer, going back 500 years or whatever. You can't consume more than you produce. You have to produce at least as much as you consume, or you're going to starve.
Suddenly, kind of overnight, everybody has to be a bank expert and has to look at their banks, their financial filings, and determine whether or not they feel safe holding them.
Western society is a scam. Check this shit. You wake up early in the morning to go to work in order to pay for a house that you hardly live in order to pay for a car that primarily gets you to and from home to work and back. The government take anywhere from 30 to 50% of your wages. And then there's things like VAT, which means you get taxed on money that's already been taxed. Save up your whole working life for a pension. And at the end of it, the government will take 40 to 50% of that. And then in your old age, you're living off canned soup and bread and water. Mate, we're all getting scammed. Then you got your state pension, which you can't get until you're 130 years old. And even then, if you die before you get it, you can't pass it down to
you on stage with a human rights activist. What does Bitcoin have anything to do with human rights? Isn't it just about investment?
Not for me. I mean, for me, that Bitcoin changes absolutely everything. And what I'm drawn to the most about it is the ethos, is what it represents, is how the conditions that created it are so rare and so special and so precious, and I don't think there's anything more important in my lifetime to work on, and I don't think there's anything more enabling for people around the world.
We often hear in our community that, yes, I agree. We often hear in our community this kind of mantra that like Bitcoin is for everybody, that it's like non-discriminatory, that it's really kind of opening for many people around the world who are walled off from whether it's transactions, saving, connecting with the world. What is your perspective on this idea that like Bitcoin is for everybody?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm focused on, making sure that I help with. Like whatever I can do, whatever my companies can do to make it accessible to everyone is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. Like if I were not at Square or Twitter, I'd be working on Bitcoin. If it needed more help than Square and Twitter, I would leave them for Bitcoin. But I think I believe both companies have a role to play, and I think anything that we can do as companies to help also find the right intersection between a corporate narrative and a community open narrative is for the best. It benefits the entire world. I mean, that's what makes it incredible, is like every single person in the world will benefit and get value from utilizing this. And the more accessible we make it, just that realization that we finally have a currency that can be traded to any single point on the planet is pretty incredible. And what that enables going forward is mind-blowing. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, this concept that Bitcoin is for everyone is, I think, what I want you to go home with. Bitcoin is non-discriminatory. It cannot choose who uses it. And none of you can block our access or her access or his access. It is something that's open for all of us, and it's open source. And I, as a human rights activist, am grateful that companies like Square are supporting the open source side of Bitcoin, are supporting non-custodial use, are supporting Lightning. These are things that I don't think may have been possible before Bitcoin's incentive structure. So I really wanted to thank you, Jack, for coming out and sharing your thoughts. It's obviously a tricky political situation out there, but I think we agree that Bitcoin is like the way forward here.
100%. It's the only way out.
Well, thank you all so much.
Benevolent Zones 1 and 2, transfer target package Suite Charlie 24. Hi, Captain. Blood tomahawk will be locked on enemy missiles. Captain, we're prepared to counter launch. We need to fire now, sir. Captain. It makes this possible.
3 seconds.
Intercept window closed.
Impact.
made, an unstoppable idea was unleashed on the world, so profound it was ignored by most in the beginning. But this idea took on a life of its own, growing through networks of people and computers, running millions of copies of its genetic code with the purpose of aligning humanity on truth. You can see with your own eyes that something is happening. You see through the lies, and so people are beginning to question why. Is it so hard to simply exist in a system that takes more than it gives? The cure is to make truth prolific through a universal portal open to everyone on the planet to access their riches, a protected percentage relinquished only by consent, maintained by a dynamic global consensus. Around every 10 minutes we advance an agreement. With every passing block it becomes a stronger alternative to the old system that is crumbling under the weight of its own deception. The truth is the antidote held in the hands of the individual. There is hope, something is happening, and in our darkest hours emerges a beacon of light, because hope cannot die as long as truth is alive.
Bankman-Fried just, a year ago was talking about buying Goldman Sachs. He viewed himself as this just enormous, greater than God, greater than any financial system kind of person. Should any of us be surprised if we'd actually listened to what the guy said?
In my view, no, because I was never fooled by it. I always thought it was just PR. And I thought if you looked at his actual actions and the things that he was doing, it was very clear that it was all just self-serving and kind of just not much different from another operator in the crypto casino space. So this is the world of non-Bitcoin crypto with all of these altcoins, and it's mostly focused on gambling rather than sort of what goes on with Bitcoin, which is people thinking that, hey, this looks like it could become a global reserve asset. Let me buy some before the number goes up too high.
Well, and we've seen Bitcoin sort of crash down with it in a pretty significant way. Interestingly enough, you say if you listen to him, just 6 weeks ago, he was interviewed on CNBC. Take a listen.
It's not going to be good for anyone long term if we have real pain, if we have like real blowouts, and it's not fair to customers, and it's not going to be good for regulation. It's not going to be good for anything. And so from a longer term perspective, it's just that was what was important.
The irony of that is pretty rich. But you think about what he was able to do. FTX celebrity partnerships, Tom Brady, Giselle, Steph Curry, Aaron Jones, Trevor Lawrence, sports partnerships, Golden State Warriors, MLB, TSM for esports. I mean, explain to us what this guy was able to put together, sort of the fraud he was able to create, and what that means. I'm sure you've got friends who are out an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, so I know some of the crypto fund managers that unfortunately rather irresponsibly left large chunks of their portfolios on FTX. One looks like it got blown out completely. Another one lost about 40% of their funds. I have nothing to do with that. I'm based in Los Angeles. I run a Bitcoin-only financial services company that doesn't mess with any of this crypto trading stuff. And frankly, I've been on a warpath the entire year with features in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, CNBC, et cetera, separating the world of Bitcoin from non-Bitcoin crypto, quote unquote, which is not decentralized and is basically just full of a lot of this gambling and trading and Ponzi scheming. So that extended to myself and whoever else I could marshal going to the agencies here in Hollywood and explaining that they were going to have egg on their faces if they cut deals with these crypto casinos, the Crypto.com Arena, the FTX FTX arena, all of these celebrities shilling those NFTs before they collapsed and going on late night talk shows. So, we've been the clearest voice. We're just looking to continue to develop and have a bigger megaphone and get more people to understand the long con that is the crypto space.
Yeah, in the same way, a lot of sort of normal everyday Americans got hurt in the Lehman Brothers crash. And certainly a lot of really normal everyday Americans got hurt in the Bernie Madoff scheme. It wasn't just all millionaires. There's a lot of just normal folks who are going to get crushed in this, that had some investments, had some Bitcoin or whatever. They kept it in FTX, and there you go. How much do you think Sam Bankman-Fried's image revolved around becoming this sort of larger-than-life political figure, donated to President Biden's campaign? Cory Booker, Tina Smith, Dick Durbin, Christian Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Abigail Spanberger, the guy who just won in Florida, Maxwell Frost. Was he buying protection?
Yeah, so he was. What the game afoot for FTX, for Coinbase, for Andreessen Horowitz, the venture firm up in Silicon Valley, for Paradigm, which is the other largest fund that was started by the other co-founder of Coinbase, Fred Ehrsam. Their game has been for a while to buy enough influence in DC to wrest oversight of the world of crypto, non-Bitcoin crypto, from the SEC and place it under the CFTC, with the quid pro quo being that they would agree to very large fees to be regulated by the CFTC, and therefore all the CFTC folks would get much, much more power and money. So that's been essentially what they've been trying to pull off. They put Sam Bankman-Fried, or as we call him in the Bitcoin space, scam, bankster, fraud. They put him at the front of that, sent him with all his MIT credentials and connections and Stanford law professor parents that run lobbying groups and things, and being the second biggest donor to the Biden campaign, they sent him to DC to be the forefront of this, and that is going to be their undoing.